Only we could all get together. Only we could all have company. Only we could all get together. All the better off we all could be.
Hello, how are you? I'm Cassidy Quinn, and this is Mentally Together. Because whether you can see it on the surface or not, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together. And no matter what our brains are experiencing, we're not alone, we're together. Let's talk about trauma. How do you work through it? Or do you just kind of assume eventually it will fade away? Before we can figure that out, I guess we should define what trauma actually is. So, the American Psychological Association says trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Or, a global pandemic. Being a human in the world, watching videos and reading headlines about people dying all the time. There is so much collective trauma that we have all been through this past year. It probably goes without saying that all this trauma can really take a toll on our mental health. But sometimes it's hard to even see that there's trauma there that we need to work through. A few days ago, I was paddleboarding on the river here in Portland. It was beautiful, the sun was setting, I was just listening to some music. It was so peaceful. Well, it was peaceful on the outside, but apparently, deeper inside my brain, it was not so peaceful. Because at one point, a song comes on, I don't even remember what song it was, but it just somehow triggered some emotional response in me. Next thing I knew, I'm still in the middle of the river, but I am bawling my eyes out. just crying to myself. And honestly, it felt great. I don't even know what I was releasing, but it was something that my brain and body had clearly been holding on to for who knows how long. Then, after a few minutes of tears, they stopped. I wiped them away, I took some deep breaths, and it was over. And I could feel that my body had relaxed and released so much tension. Anyway, some trauma can be released like this, on our own, through our tears, through exercising, talking to a friend, getting creative, but some of it, we need a little help. Working through trauma can be painful and scary and triggering. It can cause flashbacks that can be really overwhelming alone. So that is when someone like a therapist can be super helpful. My guest today has had a lot of trauma to work through in her life, and it took her a long time and a lot of therapy, but she's come out of the other side, and she is sharing that beautiful journey. It's Stephanie Thornton Plymale. From homelessness to foster care, abuse, and neglect, Stephanie was put through a lot throughout her childhood, including her mother's mental illness. And for decades, she didn't talk to anyone about it except her husband. Now she has put it all out there in a memoir called American Daughter. In it, she finally learns about the trauma her mother experienced, and working through that and her own trauma has led her to the person she is today. A confident, powerful, professional woman who is truly, fully herself. She's the owner and CEO of her own interior design school, the Heritage School of Interior Design. So I loved talking to Stephanie about how therapy and what kind of therapy helped her work through her trauma, how writing allowed her to release some of it too, and how creating an interior space that we love can actually help our brains and bodies feel better too. Now, Stephanie's life, and therefore what we talk about in this episode, does include many subjects that might be alarming to some listeners, including sexual abuse, suicide, and child abduction. So, as always, please make sure to take care of yourself, and if anything is triggering or disturbing to you, don't be afraid to ask a professional for help. Now let's get into it with... She's a survivor, she's a badass, she's an author, and about to be a podcast host. It's Stephanie Thornton Plymale. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Wow, that's a great introduction. Thank you.
There's just so many good things we could say about you. How are you doing right now? I know it's a loaded question always, but how are you doing?
Just in general, how am I doing? I'm doing great. I've I've just come out of a big book tour. And so that was like basically almost for a whole year. So I'm just kind of coming out of that. It's slowing down. I think I did close to 50 events. I've been sharing my story, launching this new podcast called Overcoming that's coming out in the spring. I have loved every minute. I definitely got exhausted, but I'm loving sharing my story. Everybody has been welcoming me with open arms. So it's been really wonderful.
Yeah, you are such an amazing example of what we talk about on this podcast all the time, of the therapeutic experience of just talking about what you've gone through, talking about your feelings,
Yes.
letting it all out. But for me, when I do that, it's on such a smaller scale than
Yeah.
you, who A, literally wrote a book with everything, and
Yeah.
B, I mean, the amount of trauma, the amount of things that you've been
Mhm.
through in your life, and the fact that this is kind of new, you actually sharing
Yeah.
everything, right?
Well, it's absolutely new. I was silent for so many years, and basically close to 50 years. Nobody knew, not even my family, not even my children, not even some of my best friends who found out about my story through my book.
Oh my gosh.
So I was really living in hiding, and there's just a lot of mental anguish just living like that in the way I was. So that's probably why I'm so happy with what I'm doing, because I'm completely free of living those, in a way, two different lives. There was my life as a child, and there's a life of Stephanie, the CEO, author, whatever. And so those two things came together as one person for me. So I'm way happier.
That's amazing. Do you feel like now it's gotten easy for you to have those conversations? I mean, you put it all in the
Yeah.
book, but then I would imagine there's this feeling the book's out there and yeah, your friends are
Yeah.
reading it, your kids are reading it, and you're like, oh, did it make those conversations then easier, or was there still an emotional hump to get over, I guess?
That's a really good question. Initially, I was just absolutely terrified. I was terrified of the design community, who I am as a CEO. All of a sudden, they just assumed I was going to be writing a design book. They didn't know
Oh my
this book
gosh.
was coming. And so that was definitely really terrifying. But as it's come out and as I've talked about it in all these events, I mean, my first talk was on the Today Show. So I went from
That was the
zero.
first what?
Yes, that was my
Which I
first.
did watch that, and that's amazing. I mean,
I
amazing to
was,
get on the Today Show, amazing for them to share your story, but
yeah.
I watched that and I definitely would not have guessed that that was the first time that you actually publicly shared
Ever.
where you didn't seem nervous, you seemed confident and had all the right words.
I was like,
That blows my
I
mind.
saw when I saw my interview, I was like, I looked like I saw a ghost to me. Like,
We're always our worst critics.
no, that was the first time 2.5 million people saw that interview and tuned in for that interview. And yeah, so I was actually completely terrified, but the Today Show is so lovely. The people, the producers, they made me feel really comfortable. But so I really just jumped into the deep end of the pool right out of the gates.
Yeah.
And so everything else seemed a slight bit easy after that.
Yeah,
But
that
no,
makes sense. Just rip off a ginormous band-aid and yep.
so that was how I did it. And not that it has been easy. And there's been times, and sometimes I do interviews and I'm very emotional and I'll start to cry. And some days I just feel so solid and it's just ready to talk and I feel okay. So every day is fluid and I try to be as real as possible with each interview, and every interview has different questions. And so it's not something I ever just get used to doing or that I want to have pat answers. I want to be authentic and real and let the interview be, what it needs to be.
That's amazing. Just hearing you talk about being present and being whole, and wow, just congratulations. You're amazing.
Thank you.
I don't even know you and I'm so proud of you. I'm like, oh,
Oh.
what was it that led you to finally say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell my story. It's time to talk about this.
Well, what happened was, before my mother was diagnosed with cancer, I had come to the point where I really wanted to tell my story. It was so exhausting. It was so exhausting kind of covering up. And when people would ask, where did you grow up? I couldn't say in a car, in a foster home, in the dependent unit of California. My mother's mentally ill. I've been in I've been in so many homes, foster homes, I can't even count. It just didn't fit with who I was today. And it was just too big of a story. And I couldn't cope with it. Actually, I just couldn't cope with it at that time to even talk about it. It was too triggering.
Yeah.
So when my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I just came to a point where I said, I need answers. I'm ready to talk about my story. I was thinking, I want to write my story. I'm ready to write it. I didn't know what was about to happen was that my mother's story was going to be revealed, and that the story of my mother and I finding each other through this process of interviews and through the process of me writing the book, the healing and the journey of her getting healthy and sharing her story became as important as me sharing my story. So that's how American Daughter was born. And it became a thing where I couldn't not share this story. If you've read American Daughter and you understand what happened, the story has to be told for so many different reasons, for mental health, foster care, a mother-daughter story, the trauma that I experienced in the system, what happened to my mother when she was abducted, to finding my family and my heritage, and kind of what happened in this story. So that's a big broad stroke of why I wrote the book, why I'm telling the story. But I'm sure if you've read the book, it's just a lot of layers, right? There's a lot to say.
Yeah, and it's a journey for the reader. I've been listening to the audiobook version, which is sometimes
Amazing.
I've had to pause and rewind for a minute and go, "Oh, I need to hear that again." Or I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much that happens, and it's amazing how you kind of go from your current state writing the book to then jumping back and going, "Oh, then we talked about this," and all of a sudden you're a teenager or a
Yeah.
little kid, and so sometimes I keep rewinding going, "Wait, what? I need to hear that and go through it again." So I can't even imagine what it was like for you writing it and actually putting it
Yeah.
out there. Was it really emotional as just putting it on paper or the computer, I
Um,
guess, probably?
First off, the audiobook is read by Mojan Marna, who's a very well-known actress, and it is absolutely beautifully done. And but yes, the writing process was very fluid, very alive, very real. I was writing in real time with my mother. This wasn't like something
Wow.
that I went through and 10 years later I decided to write a book. I was doing interviews, I was recording them, I was writing and writing. And the process of getting this all out, the process of going through this with my mother and reliving it with her, processing it with her, is really what made the book so real, is that it really was us in real time. And I do use the structure of going back and forth into the past, into the present, because that's what I was doing. I was going into the past with her, conducting these interviews, and I was also living my life at the same time. So it was very challenging to do that structure, but I really like how it turned out.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the images, these flashbacks to moments in your childhood, teenage years, adulthood, they seem so vivid. Was it hard for you to go back and put yourself there? Or
Yeah,
have they just always been living there, just waiting to come
yeah.
out, I guess?
They're always living there in a way, but I've also had a lot of therapy and a lot of trauma therapy to process these incredibly traumatic experiences. So it would be really hard for me to write about it if I hadn't done all the work in my life previous to heal from these traumatic, because I had flashbacks from, being taken from that motel to the dependent unit, being separated from my siblings, all my belongings taken from me and thrown into trash bags, into giant rooms of trash bags of kids' belongings. There was things that I went through that were so traumatic that I wouldn't have been able to write and do this work and talk about this had I not done a lot of talk therapy and a lot of EMDR trauma therapy. So that was done before, thankfully, I had done all that work before my mother was diagnosed with cancer. So I
Oh,
was
wow.
ready emotionally to write this book and to do this work
Yeah.
in my life.
Therapy is so useful for so many people for so
Yeah.
many reasons. Did it take you, what was it that got you to say, okay, I'm going to go to therapy now? Because personally, I'm still trying to go to therapy, currently looking for a therapist and going, how do I
Yeah.
even find the right person? I know I need to do
Yeah.
this. I'm ready for
Mhm.
it. I know there'll be work when I get there, but what was it that made you decide to go?
Well, I almost left my husband for a mother. That sounds really nuts. I that's where I was. So I had almost, I met my husband in high school. He's been my rock my entire life, and I almost left him. So that was kind of the breaking point of like, I need help. This isn't really about him. This is about me. This is about all this trauma living in me. And so I started looking for a counselor who specialized in trauma therapy, childhood trauma. And I found this therapist who ended up being just a godsend in my life. And I've been actually working with him in therapy, not so much now, but I did about 10 years of therapy.
Wow.
Um,
That's amazing.
and it's not just that he helped me with all the trauma work. He also was a coach. He was a business coach. He helped coach me through writing the book. He's been a support. So counseling doesn't necessarily always have to be this really dark, traumatic, you go to counselor. Your therapist can also become your right-hand person, a coach, a fill-in father, a fill-in mother. They play a lot of different roles in your life. And he did that for me. And has helped me tremendously to advance my career in a lot of ways, because as you get healthier, you get stronger, you become a stronger person, you know who you are, and it helps you with accomplishing your goals. Well, at least it has me. My therapist has been instrumental in my health and in my career.
Were you nervous when you first did
Yes.
your first session, and like what were you feeling then?
And I was a hot mess. I was just I was just a hot mess. I mean, I was depressed. I was crying all the time. When I think about it now, I realized how hard I was living this life of sadness that I just thought was me. I just thought it was me. I didn't know that there was any other way. And sometimes, so when I look in and I fast forward to who I am today, or who I even was a year or two when I was in therapy, it's just night and day. I'm not even the same person. But yes, it's so hard to make that first step. It's so hard to make that first appointment and then to show up and just let it all out. And I remember the first time I went to therapy, this is before the book, this is for everything, right?
Mhm.
And I just lay everything out on the table, and he's like, "Are you serious?" Like, he was
Oh.
he's like, "This is astounding that you're even standing." And so
Yeah.
all that was inside me. And I really feel like that's what's so important, is that people need to find somebody to talk to, let it out. Writing is such a great way to overcome so much trauma too, is just getting it out on paper. I really believe in it. I really believe in sharing your stories.
Yeah, absolutely. You're an amazing example of that, clearly. You mentioned the type of therapy that had been really helpful for you is EMDR, which stands for
Yeah.
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yeah.
What does that mean from your experience
Yeah.
to,
That's the
in the
technical.
non-doctor technical terms? Yeah.
Well, from the non-doctor technical terms, what it has been for me is, and this is the most simple way for me to explain. Basically, my therapist did a lot of strengthening of me as a person before we even started EMDR. So he had already helped me to overcome some of the issues that I was having in my personal life or professional life. So get those out of the way. Then we were ready to tackle some of this trauma stuff. So for me, when I was doing EMDR, he would have me remember the situation. So let's take the experience at the motel for one, where my mother is being put into the back of a car. She's being arrested. I'm in a police car being taken to the dependent unit, all my belongings. I'd have to relive that, and then he would take
Oh my
this
gosh.
kind of wand type of looking thing and go back and forth on my eyes. And we did this for like 2 weeks. And basically what happens is that those movements, it's like it creates this opening for the trauma to leave your brain. It's
Whoa.
almost like it washes it away. And then he did it like, I don't know, several times. And then the memory is no longer even a problem. It's like it just happened. It's like it just happened, just like you went to the grocery store. Like, it's not a big deal.
Wow.
It's
That's
like,
fascinating.
yeah, it just doesn't carry the emotional pain anymore. It's just a memory.
Wow. That
And so that's what helps with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, is because they're reliving that incident every day in their brain. And I did too. Anything would trigger. If I saw a garbage bag, I was right back where I was
Oh
as
my
that
gosh.
child. It was anything could create a memory. So EMDR took all that, it just washed it away. Like it's just part of my past. It's part of my story. It's part of my book, but it carries no weight in my life.
Wow. Are there exercises from that then you kind of do in your day-to-day life if one of these traumatic moments pops up, or how does
Well,
that
yeah, well,
work?
new traumatic moments might pop up. So new memories could come. And then I would do the whole process again of the EMDR treatment with that new memory. But I've never had a situation where that comes back and haunts me and I'm having
Wow.
PSTD ever. It's just not there.
That is so cool. I
It
mean, I'm
is.
sure there could be so many people hearing your story and listening to this right now that it's so hard if you have these big traumatic moments in your life to even imagine that they could go away, or not go away, but imagine
Mhm.
that you could think about them without getting pulled back into that moment and being triggered
Mhm.
emotionally. So that could
I
just give
didn't
so
believe it
much
was
hope to
true.
people. Yeah.
Yes. I actually didn't believe my therapist when he told me. I'm like, right. You obviously haven't been through what I've been through. I don't believe you. I didn't believe him. I thought it was a joke. I really did. I was like, this is ridiculous. No way. And it was absolutely has been more than I could have even dreamed. And the other thing is, when a lot of times when you're going through trauma or you have all this inside you, you drink more, you want to smoke cigarettes, you want to cuss people out. I mean, there's a lot of side effects to living with trauma. So then what happens are those things fall away too. Because like
Wow.
all those things that you were using to cover up and to make that pain go away, then through the therapy it starts to just, you just don't need that because you're not trying to cover it. So it's a very holistic approach to getting healthy mentally. It is hard, and the courage was reliving the trauma. There were days when I was like, this is too painful. Some days I would go home from doing EMDR and I would just have to sleep for the rest of the day because I was mentally exhausted. I had gone through like the Olympics mentally
Yeah.
to kind of get to the other side of it. So it it does take courage, but it's so worth it. If you can find a trauma therapist, EMDR therapist, in addition to talk therapy, is really it's been life changing.
So now is therapy something you continue to do, or did you get to a point, cuz I feel like some people do it forever and they just keep
Yeah,
going cuz it's useful, and then other people go, "Okay, that was the goal. Now we've achieved that and we're going to
move
be
on.
done with that."
I think I'll probably always go in and out of therapy because I absolutely love my therapist. But I just think I've gone through seasons where I just don't need it. And then I go through seasons when I do. It's very fluid and I can always come back. It's always, the door is never closed. So I just use it as I need it. And right now I don't. Right now I just feel like I'm doing so much in my life. I don't really have time for it and don't need it. But I probably will again. I have no doubt.
And I mean, clearly you've put in the work, and as I'm sure there's a bit of therapy going on as you just talk about it and do your book tour and go talk at events and then work through your own podcast and just have more conversations about it.
Yeah, and the more conversations and the more I talk to other people who've gone through difficult challenges that I've shared, the more I feel this camaraderie with humanity, and that alone is its own therapy, not feeling alone. And when you're all blocked up and all this is locked inside you, you feel alone. And that's what I experienced for so long. And I hope that others will feel less alone by sharing their stories, hearing my story. That's kind of my goal.
Absolutely. And I'd imagine that's what you felt a lot as a kid. I mean, just being,
Alone.
being alone could just, if you can get over that as an adult of, oh, I'm not alone in this experience. Are you
Yeah.
kind of like talking to your younger self and going, okay,
Mm,
you were very alone, but I'm
mhm.
here for you now.
That's actually a whole nother portion of the therapy that I've done, is what you're talking about exactly, is going back to that inner child and talking to the inner child who was completely neglected. You know, when I was in my foster home, my foster mother referred to me as a pissant. That's how she addressed me. That's
Oh
how
my
she addressed
gosh.
me. My foster father was sexually abusing me. So the amount of trauma that was in that foster home that was where that trauma therapy, where I go back into myself as a child, as the adult, responsible, fabulous adult that I've become, goes back to the child and tells myself that I'm okay, you're great, you're going to become something and you're going to be a badass someday. And these jerks, so you go back and tell yourself this stuff to help repair that relationship and give yourself the love that you didn't get. And so I've done a lot of that. And that's like my favorite therapy, because it's just so heartwarming for me to be able to go back to myself and take care of myself and nurture and love myself the stuff that I didn't get. I'm able to give myself that.
Oh,
And
that's so beautiful.
It's been a wonderful experience. And I'll tell you, I had a dream. One of the most healing things that happened to me is after I started doing that kind of trauma therapy with my inner child, I had a dream where I walked back into that foster home as myself. I'm a strong, independent, successful woman now, walked back into that child, and I was on a horse because they had horses and animals. And I was just a little girl on the horse. And I went back and I was walking myself around with this horse around the farm, just telling myself as a child, you're going to be so great at all of this. You're such a natural. And I started telling myself, and I didn't want to wake up from this dream. And when it was over, it didn't feel like it was just a dream. It felt like it was the reconnection of myself and little Stephanie had kind of become one again, because I had dissociated from myself to protect myself. And at that point I had become one again. And it was just so healing. And I just was remembering that dream and what it did when you were just asking about it.
Wow. That's beautiful.
This
And
really
I'm so glad
was.
that when you woke up, you felt not sad that that was over, that you had connected, and it felt good.
Well, I was like, oh, I don't want to wake up. This is so wonderful. I just loved it so much, but it was just a part of my story. It was a part of the healing journey. And it was just really, really good for me.
Yeah. I would imagine going through everything you did as a child and teenager would take quite a toll on your self-confidence.
Yeah.
How and you seem, at least from an outsider who just met you, to be a very confident woman. I mean, you just said a minute ago, you're like, yes, she's going to talk to that little Stephanie and tell her she's going to be a badass. She's going to be fabulous and responsible adult. Is that how you feel now? Do you feel really confident?
Mm-hmm. I do in a lot of ways. I've really built a lot in my life. I've done a lot of work. I've started schools. I've written a book. I've started a podcast. I've been on multiple shows and different things that I never thought I would do. And I think all of those experiences have helped to create a really strong sense of self, because I'm just putting myself out there, and I'm relying on the fact that I'm just showing up with you. I don't have to be anything anymore. I don't have to pretend to be anything. I'm just here, and that's enough. And that's the confidence, is just to be able to be here. That being said, there are days where I wake up and go, what am I even doing? I'm terrible at everything. I have the same.
What? You're still a human? I thought you've just become invincible now.
No, I have a lot of days where I'm like, what am I even doing? Nobody likes my book. Nobody wants, I have the same insecurities as anyone, but then I try to remember what my purpose and kind of my goals are, and pick myself up. And it's funny, I can have 1,000 amazing reviews and get one bad review, and what do I dwell on?
That one.
One. It's annoying.
Lodges itself in your brain, and you're like, can we just start patting all the other ones on top? I started a Google Doc recently of I'm like, okay, if somebody says something nice or leaves a nice comment, I'm just going to put it in this Google Doc. So then if I'm having a bad, sad imposter syndrome day, I'm going to open it up and be like, look, someone liked me. Someone thought it was good. Yes.
I can relate to that. Definitely.
So you mentioned now, you run your own school, you started your own interior design firm, now your own interior design school, which is the Heritage School of Interior Design, which is, started in Portland. Now you're in Seattle and Denver. I mean, it's everywhere. What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, from the very beginnings of my childhood, and I even start my book as this memory of living on the beach, living in the back of my mom's car, and I run into this bus, and it's completely transformed into a beautiful bus. And now we know, since it's a trend now, that it was probably amazing, because
Yep.
it seared itself into my mind. And then I went on through life just kind of recreating home out of nothing. And then as I got older, I wanted to be a designer. I started my own design business in my 20s, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nobody does that. And then I was a designer for like 20 years, and I was kind of ready to do something different. So I went back to school and started studying business and coaching, did a master's program. And then the school came up for sale. And I was like, for some reason, I think this is going to be a good thing for me. I'm going to buy it. So I just bought this school that had closed down. And it was basically literally, I took it out of the back of the owner's, out of her garage, because it had completely closed down. And I started this really great school in Portland. And then we started another really great school in Seattle, and then another really great school in Denver. And now it's just growing, and we're helping facilitate people getting educated for careers that they love in the design industry. And it's booming. The design industry is just absolutely booming right now. With COVID and everything, people are reinventing their homes. But I really always had the goal that I wanted to create beautiful spaces for people that they love. And it kind of came out of the fact that I never really had a home. And so I wanted to create that for other people. And then it became to wanting to create amazing education so that people who maybe couldn't afford a 4-year degree, or didn't have time, or people who already have degrees could come back and have this career that they love. So that's how it kind of happened. It was a process of my passion kind of coming to life, and the things that I want to do and to help others.
And I know that even with your school, now you have a whole foundation arm of that, right? That gives back to organizations.
How I was introduced to you is that I'm doing a talk on William Temple. And as you know, from my story and from what happened to my mother, who never received any therapy, any talk therapy, William Temple is providing counseling for people at the most minimum fee, just whatever people can afford. They are providing that kind of therapy for relationship or anxiety, depression, for talk therapy. That is amazing. Therapists are so hard to find and can be really expensive.
Yeah.
And people who don't have insurance, it's not accessible to them. So that's why I'm so committed to William Temple and getting the message out of what they do. And I really believe in counseling and therapy, helping people to get healthy and helping people to not feel alone. And also Project Lemonade for foster care, helping to furnish homes. First off, for Project Lemonade, they are providing clothes, backpacks, shoes, everything a foster kid would need. And so that organization means a lot to me, because I never had clothes or anything. I always felt like such an outcast. And so what they're doing is helping to normalize a part of a foster kid's life. Humble Design is helping to furnish homes for people who are transitioning into their own home. And we're finding that there's almost 100% retention rate for people who have furnished homes, because they furnish and design the home. So when people love their space, they want to hold on to it. They want to keep it. It becomes a priority. So all this stuff that we're doing. So my foundation is kind of an umbrella of lots of different work.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's amazing that you can find so many ways to give back to little Stephanie.
I know, that's so cute. I love how you put that. That's really cute.
So you just heard Stephanie mention a place called William Temple House, and you've heard her talk about how much therapy has helped her in her recovery. And if you've ever tried going to therapy, you know how ridiculously expensive it can be. That's where William Temple House comes in. They provide affordable mental health counseling to people in the Portland area. And when they say affordable, they actually mean it. On average, their clients pay less than $4 a session. Because of the pandemic, they've seen a 17% increase in people coming in for counseling, which just shows how huge the need is. Plus, they offer social services under the same roof, including healthy food, hygiene products, clothing, and more. Oh, and they run an awesome thrift store where you can donate items and then shop for all kinds of things, knowing your purchases are doing good in the community. If you want to support the great work they do at William Temple House, you can donate right now at williamtemple.org. Again, go to williamtemple.org to make a donation for the amazing services they provide. I love nut butter. Okay, that definitely sounds weird when I say it out loud in audio form, but you know you love it too, okay? Some toast with some nut butter on it in the morning. So let me introduce you to my favorite nut butter makers, Ground Up. They make super unique flavors like cinnamon snickerdoodle, coconut cardamom, and Oregon hazelnut. I can honestly never pick a favorite, but that is not the only thing that makes them unique. Ground Up's tagline is spread good, because the company also provides job opportunities to women overcoming adversity, like incarceration, homelessness, and mental illness. You can support their mission by buying some delicious nut butter for yourself at grounduppdx.com. And use the code MENTALLYTOGETHER, all one word, for 15% off your order. That's code MENTALLYTOGETHER, all one word, at grounduppdx.com.
Now, back to the show.
It makes so much sense seeing your story and seeing, like you just said, the fact that you didn't have a home, you didn't have a place to call your own, that you could set
Yeah.
up and make you feel good in that space. I have always had a home, a roof over my head, and I'm very
Yeah.
grateful and privileged for that. But somehow still it took probably until COVID, really, that I started to understand that the space that I'm in does have an impact
Mhm.
on my mental health. I kind of just always thought of it as, this is my space. I'm very grateful to have a space, but
Yeah.
I'm also very messy. So I never really put two and two together until this past year of like, oh, having a space that I can walk into and now during the pandemic spend way too much
Mhm.
time in, of course.
Yeah.
Makes sense that the industry is booming.
Yeah.
But going, oh, having a clean space, having
Yeah.
things that bring me joy when I look at them, it seems very obvious to me now, but it took me a
Yeah.
very long time to figure out that connection.
Yeah.
What does that connection mean to you, like between your
Yeah.
mental health and your space?
Well, it's always been there for me. What didn't take COVID to do anything for me. I mean, um for me, my home is my sanctuary. It's everything to me. It's having your loved ones over, having a space that you're proud of to entertain in, just being home every day. For me, I don't take a day in my home for granted. You know, when you come from homelessness your entire childhood life, a young adolescent, I never had even, I can't even believe this. I never had a bedroom. I slept on sofas and floors and back of cars, in cars. I never had a space. If I had a room at a foster home, it was a room with a lamp, a dresser, and a bed. There was never stuff hanging or beautiful space. So for me, when I walk into my home every single day, it's spectacular. And it's all me. It's everything about it is, my poor husband, it's not how he would design, but he loves it.
He's
But
got
yeah,
to trust you. He's
he
like,
does.
okay,
He
yep.
does. But it's funny. It's not what he would choose. We talk about that, but it's a space that I love. And I just think that having a space that you love, especially now with COVID, we've learned your home is your sanctuary. It is, make it what you love, make it a place you want to work now, where you want to eat with your family every day. So nothing's changed for me. I've always loved my space. What's happened for me during COVID is that I started doing design videos for people
Ooh.
so I've used my house as kind of a studio. I have like my own little store in my house. If you watch me on Instagram, you'll think I'm nuts, but I'm always redoing a space and doing videos for people and floral design. So now I've become more of a teacher of design through my social media, and it's been more just super fun and kind of building of my overall brand. But yeah, no, home's very important.
And I love that, a lot of people might hear that and go, oh, well, I don't have a bunch of money to spend
Oh,
on getting everything new and redesigning my house. And
no,
obviously, there are plenty of ways to spend a lot of money doing that. But you also are a huge proponent of, you don't have to do that. Like, there doesn't have to be a lot of money
no.
involved, right?
Well, no, everything I purchase at my house, if you do follow me on Instagram, you'll see me at antique stores, thrift stores, William Temple thrift store. I mean, that's what I love doing. So everything is just really inexpensive. So when I redesign, it's just fresh flowers. You'll see me outside cutting flowers. every weekend I'm cutting a bush down somewhere and I'm making a flower arrangement in my house. So it doesn't have to cost a lot. It just, you can be creative and just start thinking out of the box and think about what you want in your house and the colors that you want.
Yeah, what advice that there's a little right there for sure. What
Yeah.
advice would you have for someone listening to this who goes, okay, yeah, maybe it's time. I need to make my space a
Yeah.
little more joyful and more myself. Where do I start?
So what I always tell people to do to start is go to either Pinterest, go to Instagram and start creating your own page of spaces that you love. Like, does that
Oh,
make your heart race? Oh, I love that. I love that color. You'll start to see a general theme of what you like. And that's what I tell people to start because sometimes they just don't even know what they like or who they are. They've just thrown a sofa and a chair into a room and a plant and call it good. But it doesn't create that atmosphere and the energy that you want in your house. So that's what I tell people to do. Create your own page of just inspiration of what you want in your house.
that makes a lot of sense because I definitely do that of like saving things on Instagram, like, oh,
Yeah.
I like that, I like that. And then, yeah, after a while, you go, oh, they all have a bright blue wall. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Okay, that's why I liked all of those. Maybe I should paint a blue wall in my house, which I would
Or you
like to.
might, yeah.
Haven't done yet.
Or you might decide, wow, I really am a boho look. This is what I love. Or I love French country. Wow. I just realized that. And so you'll kind of realize what you really love. And then your design can kind of come out of that. And I mean, you can always hire a designer, of course. But if that's how you want to start, just getting to know who you are and what you really want. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to cost a fortune at all. I've changed stuff all the time that costs nothing.
Wow. That is amazing. And that is so inspirational to hear because yeah, sometimes it can seem like it would cost so much money and you gotta
Yeah.
buy a bunch of things if I'm gonna make it over. And then sometimes that's what we tell ourselves is the therapy. We're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna buy something, it's gonna feel great.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really do
It
anything.
doesn't. Yeah.
Little
No.
dopamine hit for a second and then it's over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, current adult badass CEO Stephanie, if you wake up on one of those days, as you mentioned, where you're just not feeling good, whether it's some imposter syndrome kicking in or some kind of negative emotions, you just wake up and it's just not your day. What
Yeah.
are some of the things that you try to do to pick yourself up or to help you get
Oh,
back to a good space mentally?
that is that's a great question because I do tend to have days like that. And I think, to be honest, I talk to my husband about it. I talk to him about it. I get it out. I'm feeling this way. This is what I'm thinking, and having his support. Also, I do when I'm feeling that way. I have a counselor, and I do talk to my counselor. These are very real feelings. The thing that I'm learning what not to do is to stuff it and say and shame myself and say you're just being a baby, you're just being blah. And that's the kind of stuff I used to do is try to pick myself up by shaming myself. And now instead, I let it out. I might pray about it, do some meditation around it, talk to my husband, talk to a friend, talk to my therapist, get it out, and be completely kind and gentle to yourself. That's one of the things I've learned through therapy too, is to be kind and gentle to myself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think we all definitely do that to ourselves of put shame like, oh, you're just being a baby.
Yeah.
But then hearing that you also do that when the things that you're quote being a baby as perceived by you in that moment about are so different on such a different level than the things that pop up in my mind that, oh my God, you're just being a baby. Stop crying about this today,
Yeah.
but it's all real for everyone. I think whatever level that's at, it's still
Mhm.
something that's an emotion popping up in you. It's still trauma, whatever it is, on whatever level of the scale, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think the most powerful thing you can do is just to not stuff it, but to let it out, talk about it in a positive way and give yourself that grace and kindness to process through it.
What advice would you have for someone who wants to open up that pathway of conversation, whether it's
Mhm.
with a parent like you did with your mother or
Mhm.
a mother, father to their child who wants to
Yeah.
talk about their own mental illness or their struggles that they're going through? What advice would you have?
Well,
that
it
is
takes,
hard.
it is really hard. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage. And I have met with many people who've read my book has said, I wish I would have done that. I wish that I would have had that conversation with my mother before she died. I wish I knew who my mother was before she died. So often we don't even know. So
Yeah.
if you have that desire to process it, to process either trauma or something's been bothering you with your loved ones or your mother, or I really think you need to take the step in that direction to do that work in your life, to do that work with that other person. I also believe that you need the support around you. You can't do it alone, whether you have a friend or a counselor that you're talking to. I recommend getting a counselor first and foremost, and then you can start to process that with your counselor. Could be a coach, so that way you have that support, you have those other opinions. But processing all of this trauma, grief, my history, what happened with my mother was the best thing that ever happened in my life. Absolutely. Also, having my mother by her, being by her side through the process of her dying was one of the most special moments of my life. And so take a risk and just see how the blessings come out for you, but have the support around you to do it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that's so beautiful. And I'm so glad that you found that with your mother and that you took that risk, because it's a risk, but for the most part, whenever I've asked somebody about taking that risk, they
Mm.
always say something similar to you, that it was positive, that it was really scary, but it didn't
Yeah.
go bad in the end. It was good in the long run.
Yeah.
And that is important for people to remember too.
Absolutely. It can be life changing for both people.
Yeah. So of course I have to ask you about your podcast, which is coming
Yeah.
out soon, Overcoming. So
Yes.
what can people expect from that?
Yeah. So it's called Overcoming, and I am going to be interviewing extraordinary people who've gone through most extraordinary circumstances, who have come out on the other side to give their techniques, their strategies, their advice. And we're talking about people who've gone through situations of suicide, people who've had family members murdered, celebrities, authors, all of these amazing people who've had so much trauma, and they've come out on the other side to be successful. And we're going to be learning from them. So that's what Overcoming is.
That's amazing. Have you learned a lot throughout the interviews that you've done so far?
I've just been absolutely inspired by the interviews so far, and just hearing these amazing stories. And people say that I'm kind of the poster child of an overcoming story. So I feel like I've been through everything, and there's nothing that you can tell me that is going to shock me, surprise me. And so
Ooh,
I feel like I'm the perfect person to be here to facilitate these amazing conversations. And it's not all
absolutely.
about the sad stories, it's about the overcoming stories. Those are the stories I want to hear, and I want to help teach people that they can overcome in their life.
That's so cool. I'm so excited to get to
Um,
hear it and for people to get to hear it. And yeah, you are clearly the perfect host to lead people through that. And I'm sure there's times when people's own shame or trauma comes up, and I would think that
I
you would
see it. I got it.
help them through that in the moment.
I can
It's
help them through it. I see it. I know it. I've lived it. I've been through it. So there's a lot of camaraderie in these conversations. So, and there is for everybody, and we're finding that everybody has a story. So I want to build this community of sharing stories to help people overcome. That's my goal.
Yeah. It's amazing to hear you talk about how talking about your story has helped you, writing about your story. And you mentioned earlier, just you would recommend writing for
Mhm.
people as a way to get these things out. How
Absolutely.
would, you always hear, oh, journaling is so good. It's so good
Yeah.
to help you process things. How would you suggest people just get started?
Well, there's also a lot of authenticity on social media now, and Instagram and Facebook and stuff. And that can be a platform for people to help to share their stories with people that they know. And they're probably going to find that there's other people who've gone through it who really appreciate the authenticity. I do think writing or blogging, yeah, just raw writing of your emotions, just letting it out, is very powerful. Once it goes from here to your heart to the paper, or to your phone, or
That's a
however you want to
beautiful
write.
image. Yeah. that it's like going through your heart and out. Yeah.
And out here. It's very powerful.
That's so cool. Are there things that you ended up helping your mother through, or that you learned about mental illness that you wished you knew sooner?
Yeah. Well, so my mother had multiple personalities. She had 3 different personalities. One was very violent, very dangerous, a criminal actually. The other one was a little girl who was afraid, scared, pregnant all the time. And these all came from the trauma of what happened with the abduction. And then there was my mom. And so I lived my entire life terrified of her, terrified. You know, if you watch the movie Sybil or any of these movies where they show kind of multiple personalities, it's terrifying because you can watch somebody morph into almost like a separate person where they walk different, she talked different. You know, so I could see my mother morph into these other people. It was absolutely terrifying. But as I processed this with her and as I didn't let these personalities scare me anymore, I wasn't going to let her personalities bully me anymore. It was like I stood up to it and I understood it for what it was. It was just a way of her dealing with her trauma and reliving the trauma, as we all do. She definitely did it in her own way, but we all relive it. And so when I realized all of that was from this, it just took the fear away. It's like understanding. And that's what American Daughter shares, that story of the mental illness and where it came from and what it is. And we don't need to fear it. We don't need to shame it. We just need to understand and have empathy. So I wish I would have had more empathy growing up, but I was just so afraid because it was my mother.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. How could you not be?
Yeah.
If you're loving this episode of Mentally Together, you might be curious. What goes on behind the scenes? Which parts of the conversation were left on the cutting room floor? Well, let's talk about it. Over on Patreon, my patrons get to see deleted video clips from every episode and get to be the first to ask questions of each podcast guest. And every month, I host an exclusive live stream for patrons only, where we actually get to hang out and talk to each other. Not that you necessarily needed another Zoom call in your life, but this one is fun, I promise. Oh, and as one of my patrons, you get every episode of the show a day early, on Sundays. You can read all about the different tiers and sign up at patreon.com/CassidyQuinn. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/CassidyQuinn. Okay, now we have a quick round of questions, a little speed round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, when was the last time you cried?
This morning on my way here.
Gotta let it out. What about the last time you had a big belly laugh? The opposite.
Probably here with you all the time.
Yes. Hey.
I laugh all the time. As a matter of fact, most people who have gone through a lot of trauma, they're either really depressed or they think everything's funny. I tend to be on the other side. Comedians, I'm always laughing at stuff. I think things are really funny and I think I'm funny. So I laugh at myself.
I think so too, yeah. What are you grateful for right now?
Oh, I'm thankful for, I'm thankful to have a voice, to be able to tell my story, to be able to speak, to be able to have this platform and for what I'm doing, even right now.
Yeah. I'm grateful for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
What sound can calm you down or bring you joy as soon as you hear it?
I probably jazz music.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Jazz music is very inspiring for me, and I play it all the time.
That's so cool. I love that. What about a smell that does the same thing?
Candles, 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 candles all over my house.
Do you have a favorite candle scent?
I just like probably homey scents, like apple cinnamon. I love like an apple cinnamon because it smells like somebody's baking and it just smells homey.
What is the best thing you do for your mental health?
Probably the best thing I do is I am just tootling around my house, creating flower arrangements, moving pillows, fluffing pillows. Like just tootling around my house is just so fun for me, just to be designing and recreating spaces, that's probably my happy place. Turn everything off, turn the music on, and just make a flower arrangement or rearrange the furniture. That's my love. That's my happy place.
I would imagine that is kind of like meditating. Like it's a form of meditation, right? You kind of get into that state.
Yeah, and it's just something I do by myself, and the house is nice and the candles are lit, and I'm just being creative. It's probably being creative.
Ooh, yeah. That's so helpful for my brain as well. Although I'm not very good at decorating, but just creating things. What about the worst habit for your mental health that you maybe need to stop doing?
Probably drinking too much, or like drinking wine, or I can't handle any heavy alcohol. It just makes me feel bad and depressed. So any kind of drinking for me is not good for me. It makes me feel bad.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. It took me a while to realize, like, oh, if I have more than like 2 drinks, the next day I'm just gonna be kind of sad. Why do I feel sad? Oh,
Drinking.
I take antidepressants and then I drink a depressant. That they kind of cancel each other out. So yeah.
So that's the honest answer. Drinking
Yeah.
too much.
What is your favorite thing about your brain?
My favorite thing about my brain is, and it's probably my favorite thing, is that my brain is so creative. It's so creative, whether it's creating schools, whether it's creating a podcast or creating a book. I see it all as creativity, and that's my superpower.
Yes, it is a superpower. That's great. Great word. What is your biggest guilty pleasure?
Oh, that's embarrassing. Well, just no, I have 2 guilty pleasures. One's embarrassing. I like to watch like really horrible reality shows, like 90 Day Fiance. I can binge watch that, or my 600-pound life for whatever reason. But if I'm being a guilty pleasure, but I'm actually just being somebody that I love being, is when I watch my HGTV interior design shows, and I can binge watch those. Just watched Rock the Block. Best show ever. You should watch it. Rock the Block.
Yeah.
It's so good. So I watched that. So that's my guilty pleasure, is binge watching reality shows.
When is the Stephanie Thornton Plymale reality designing, decorating show coming out?
That will be neurotic.
HGTV?
That would be fun. I don't know. That's a goal. That's on there. That's on the goal.
Putting it out into the world.
Someday.
When do you feel most yourself?
Probably, I don't know, doing these talks. I really do feel like I feel most myself, and I really enjoy sharing, because I went for so many years without sharing anything to anybody ever. And so now just having these opportunities to talk to wonderful people like you and all these different talk shows, I totally feel like myself.
That's so great.
That's a tough question, because like everybody knows, I'm really good at making lasagna.
Ooh.
I have a couple really good recipes and people probably know that too, because I put it on social media, me making my lasagna.
That sounds so good. And the last one is the most random of all. If you had to get something tattooed on your forehead,
Oh,
like
God.
everyone's doing it now, in the future, for some reason I'm in charge. It's a horrible idea. And it's like your message to the world, your billboard. You look in the mirror, you can see it for yourself as well. What would your forehead tattoo say?
Oh my goodness. Gosh, that's a really hard one. First off, I would never get a tattoo. I'm not a tattoo person.
Which makes sense, because you're all about like redesigning spaces and changing things, and it's not permanent, which is the opposite of a tattoo.
I feel like anything I say might be cliche, but I do feel like authenticity is my word. It's my word. So being authentic is probably the word, but I would never tattoo it on myself. But that's what I want for people. That's what I want for the world, is for people to be authentic, to be gentle and kind with one another. And so that's kind of what American Daughter is really about understanding.
Yeah. And then, of course, where can people follow you on social media, find your book, all of the things, the podcast soon?
So you can follow everything going on American-daughter.com. That's my website. And absolutely everything's on there. But you can follow me at Stephanie Thornton Plymale on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I'm everywhere.
Oh my gosh, I need to follow you on TikTok. TikTok is the weirdest, most wonderful.
Yeah, I'm just
Full of
kind of
information.
discovered it. It's a very fun platform. Very fun.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story with the world. Thank you for taking time to share more of it with me and
Thank
give
you
some
for
advice to
having
people.
me.
And thank you. And thank you, wonderful human, for listening to this episode of Mentally Together. We release new episodes every Monday, so I, Cassidy Quinn, will see you next week. In the meantime, go do something nice for your brain today. Go decorate your room, read Stephanie's book, American Daughter. I put the link in the show notes, by the way. Whatever will make your day just a little bit better. Because remember, we are all just trying to keep ourselves mentally together.
Only we could all be together. All the better off we all could be.
Mentally Together is produced, hosted, and edited by Cassidy Quinn in collaboration with Koba FM, a podcast network that is all about community, baby.